What's going on, Governor? It's Chisgule here, and today we're bringing you the long-awaited guide for Aethelflaed. If you like Rise of Kingdoms guides about all the commanders, you should like and subscribe, because we've got one for just about every single commander at this point. And we are a sponsor creator with Rise of Kingdoms. As you know, when we do a commander guide, we talk about the skills, the talents, how you unlock the commander, and last but not least, the pairings. So let's get right into the mix, because this commander does stuff. This is a free-to-play legendary commander. That's right. Anyone can max out this commander, and that means we all should be thinking about what we're going to be doing with Aethelflaed. Now, this first skill really sets the pace for what she's actually going to be used for, which is debuffing the enemy. This first skill deals damage to up to 5 enemy targets, that is a lot of folks, in a forward-facing arc, reducing their attack, defense, and health by 30% for 2 seconds. This is a massive, massive debuff. A massive debuff. The damage factor is not significant. It's an only 800 damage factor, but the debuff is tremendous. Someone needs to be putting these debuffs on the enemy to get serious value. Now, the next skill I think is kind of uninspiring. First, there's a counterattack damage taken reduction. You take 20% less counterattack damage. Okay, I guess that's interesting. And you reduce the march speed of cavalry by 50% and all other units by 30%. So you're slowing down enemies. I mean, look, if you think of Aethelflaed as a utility player with these debuffs from the first skill, then throwing on another debuff is not so bad. Reducing the march speed is meaningful. This effect happens when you are actively attacking. I don't know if that's skill attacks and normal attacks. There's a 10% chance to have this march speed reduction go into play. I think it's fine. I think it's on plan with debuffing. Let's look at the next skill. A solid 35% damage to barbarians and 35% more experience. I mean, I love what's going on here for battling barbarians. She's a commander that you'll use for barbarians and feel pretty good about that. As a very important note, don't use a lot of experience tomes on her. Eventually, all your peacekeepers get up to 60, and then when you use them for battling barbarians, it's just kind of wasted experience. On to the next skill. This final skill increases the rallied army capacity by a solid 10%. That means the rally can have 10% total more troops, and when you have 3 different unit types in the army, you get a solid 20% damage boost, which is actually very, very meaningful. Normal attacks, skill attacks, counter attacks, 20% damage boost is really actually quite good. You're going to be bringing a mixed army with this commander, which is kind of interesting because we're used to battling barbarians with commanders like Minotaur, and you're supposed to bring full cavalry to those rallies. You should only send full cavalry to those rallies. Anyways, I think the skill is interesting. It makes it so that you can have a pretty meaningful rally in both PvE and PvP, although this is probably not the commander I'd be using to rally stuff. I mean, like, forts and flags and that kind of stuff. Barbarian forts go ham. The final skill deals an extra 20% damage to enemies who have been slowed. Now, this recontextualizes the slow over here. It recontextualizes her effectiveness in group PvP, because, like, gosh, people throw out a lot of slows, right? So you're all but guaranteed to get that 20% extra damage if you unlock the expertise skill, which means you have to take every single one of these skills to 5. Overall, Aethelflaed is a debuffing commander. I'd use her in the open field to reduce the effectiveness of enemies, and that is in part because of the skills that she has, and in part because of the talents. Let's get a look at those. She's got the leadership tree and the support tree and the peacekeeping tree. This is a combination we have not seen in the past. Now, what I really love about the support tree is Rejuvenate. If you compare to the skill tree, You get substantially more rage from the skill here. 150 rage whenever a skill is used. That's the primary commander and the secondary commander for the grand total of 300, which that is a lot of rage generation, my friends. That is a lot of rage generation. We also really like hasty departure for the open field. You get a 60% movement speed boost when you are departing from a resource node or a flag. You can really make your way around the battlefield leveraging hasty departure. We're a big fan of loose formation, which reduces skill damage taken, and from there you have a lot of really interesting choices with what you want to do with your talents on this commander. One school of thought is to go all in on the debuffing plan and to say, hey, we're going to try and do as many debuffs as possible because that's why we're bringing this army to the battlefield. In which case, Cage of Thorns is really quite excellent, reducing the march speed of nearby enemies, which, hey, what do you know? That's really on plan with her expertise skill. Seems really, really good. So when you use an active skill, now you slow everybody, which isn't going to stack, probably, isn't going to stack on top of the second skill, which has a more meaningful slow. It's a higher slow percentage, so I don't think it'll overwrite it. But you will have a higher chance of having a slow up at any time on one of the armies that you're hitting, which seems really good. Along the way, you're getting some additional skill damage mitigation, which is great. Whenever troops led by this commander take skill damage, there's a chance that you gain additional skill damage reduction for the next 3 seconds. Very good, especially if you're getting focused down in the open field. Now, since you've got a rage engine, in the form of Rejuvenate, I like to push the rage engine a little bit. I wouldn't leave home without Hidden Wrath. Every time you're attacked, you're going to be generating 6 rage, and in the open field, if a bunch of armies turn on you, I mean, you should run, but if you don't run, you're going to be generating a lot of rage. Along the way, we really do need to get the march speed, which is up over here. We need a way to get around the battlefield beyond just hasty departure, and from here, you have some really interesting choices with your talent points. You could pick up and max out strategic prowess. The advantage of this is that, hey, you already are building a rage engine, and every time you use a skill, now you're going to increase your defense for 2 seconds. That seems really, really strong. I like that a lot, in fact. Alternatively, you could make your way over to Thoroughbreds, and you could max out Thoroughbreds. So to be a little bit more clear about exactly how many talent points you have, you're going to have enough to get all the way up to here, and you could max this out, but then you're only going to have 14 points left. It takes a grand total of 60 points to get Cage of Thorns with just Elixir, not going up to get counterattack. Then you make your way up to strategic prowess. I might be off a little bit on the total number of talent points. I counted 60. So that means you're 2 points short of maxing out Thoroughbreds. You could just put 2 points into strategic prowess and then max Thoroughbreds. You could also put only 3 points into Cage of Thorns, which I think would actually be fine, and max Thoroughbreds, once again, for the movement speed. Alternatively, right, you max Cage of Thorns, you go all the way up to here, max this out, then you run off to the side, you get fresh recruits, you grab Armor to the Teeth, you could get Armored to the Teeth, there's a bunch of good stuff, you put only 1 point in here and you say, I'm not worried about the march speed. I'm not worried about the march speed because I've got hasty departure, I've got a way around the battlefield. I think you're probably better off with the peacekeeping talents, quite honestly. Those are the builds I would recommend, my friends, for open field PvP combat. Of course, if you're battling barbarians, I mean, it depends on what you're going for here. If you're trying to chain barbarians infinitely, then Curing Chant is actually pretty good. You get Rejuvenate to pair with it. If what you're doing is battling forts, which, yeah, you could do that with this commander, you'd want Mighty Force. You don't have to get Thoroughbreds, but I like the march speed for forts, quite frankly. You spend a lot of time running to and from the forts, so I think march speed is pretty reasonable. You'd certainly get Rejuvenate. You could also focus all the way up to Name of the King for the extra efficiency when you're leading rallies, which I think would be a pretty reasonable strategy. But no matter where you go, don't leave home without Rejuvenate. Do not leave home without Rejuvenate. Absolutely crucial. Let's talk about where you get the sculptures for Aethelfaed, because this is sort of unusual. Ethelfled is available to you in the Expedition. And in the Expedition shop, you can get 3 a day, but only 3, which, man, it's like 260-ish days to get the expertise skill on Ethelfled, which means we're going to be working on her for a while. And because you want Ethelfled most likely to be a primary commander to take advantage of the talents that are available to her, I already started starring her up. I did not wait to max the first skill and then the second skill or do any fancy stuff. I maxed the first skill. I should clarify. I did max the first skill, but after I had done that, boom, I started her up, and that was that. So I maxed the first skill, then I proceeded all the way to 4 stars, and I'm just sort of leveling her up and skilling her up as we go. Because this commander is free to play, we need to get a good look at all the pairing options at the legendary tier and the epic tier, because you do have a lot of really good choices. At the legendary tier, you really want commanders that support mixed troops. And in addition, we're really talking about open field combat. There's a few commanders that I would recommend. One route you could go, and I know this sounds insane because I just said bring mixed troops, is to use Yi Seong-Gye as the secondary and to bring almost all archers. Almost all archers, but not 100% archers. And you still get all the benefits of Aethelflaed's skill for having different troop types, and you get almost all of the benefit from Yi Seong-Gye's Rage Restoration over here and Archer Attack bonus. That's actually an interesting combination. If you had an Expertise Yi Seong-Gye, you would be doing serious AoE damage, both with a cone, and then after you've dropped their stats, boom, you hit them with the big AoE nuke. I think that's actually a surprisingly reasonable combination. Surprisingly reasonable. Up next, at the legendary tier, I think Hannibal Barca is a really solid pairing. You could use Barca as the secondary in this configuration. I don't love using Barca as the secondary because this 4th skill is elevating Hannibal Barca's damage. So in my perfect world, you have Barca do the skill attack, and then you have a big skill attack commander following it up. In this case, you're not so worried about the damage. What you're enjoying is the fact that both of them care about mixed troops, and you're both going to do a bunch of AoE debuffing. And if you use your Aethelflaed as the primary, you're going to benefit from something Hannibal Barca really needed all along, which is much better mobility and much better rage generation. So I think that combination actually is deceptively good, and I would recommend it highly. I think Frederick I is an okay pairing, but not stupendous. The healing synergy, I think, is good with the talents that are available on Aethelflaed. I think the rage engine is great for really ramping up the damage that Freddy would do. And I love the fact that you are bringing more troops to the battlefield than the enemy. I think there is actually a lot of synergy here, and it's a fine pairing. I'll say that this is a combination you would consider bringing if you're a big hitter T5 player. Not as much a combination you should be considering if you're trying to be a debuffer, which is what a free-to-play player should be angling for. Julius Caesar is an interesting consideration, but because we want Aethelflaed to be a primary commander, I would sort of disqualify Julius Caesar as an optimal commander in Aethelflaed army. If we jump down now to the epic tier, there's a bunch of considerations and commanders that we would recommend, some more highly than others. In a similar way that we used Yi Seong-Gye, you could also bring Kusunoki as a secondary. Most of the units in the army would, in fact, be archers, so you get a lot of benefit from the skills that are here, and you just double down on the fact that you're going to do a lot of AoE damage. I think it's fine, but not stellar. You could go the route of using CPO. And I think this gives you a lot of sustainability in the open field, which I think is actually not so bad if your goal is to debuff, but I think we can do better. One example of a commander that I think is better, and a part of the reason I think this is better, is that while Aethelflaed does have a rage engine from the support tree, I think she needs a lot of help because the debuff she has is only a 2-second debuff, but you want as much uptime as possible for that. So commanders that generate rage have more value, and Boudica is a commander that generates rage and does more debuffing. I don't know that this debuff will stack with the debuff from Aethelfaed, but I also don't know that it matters. We'll have to test that out to see how those stack. If they don't stack, then this becomes substantially less interesting. But I do really like the rage generation from Boudica. You could use Pelagius, as I mentioned with Kusunoki, in a similar vein. In this case, you'd bring mostly cavalry and then a couple other units. You get the benefit of the cavalry stat boost. You get the benefit of the rage restoration. And there's healing synergy here with the talents on our good friend Aethelflaed. A solid choice. I like Pelagius. Use him as the secondary probably in that configuration. And enjoy. I probably would not be looking at Belisarius. It is true that he's got debuffs that he has. It is true that he is a debuffing commander, but I'd rather have a rage engine than the debuffs that Belisarius is bringing. Let's get a look at a commander that does bring a rage engine, and that's actually Sun Tzu. Of all commanders, Sun Tzu's got a tremendous rage engine. Sun Tzu cares about infantry, but barely. And the AoE here is tremendous, and AoE is freaking tremendous in the open field. There's no debuffing coming from Sun Tzu, but the rage engine here means that you're not only going to do a lot of damage, but you are going to get Aethelflaed's debuff rolling very, very rapidly. This would be one of the very top choices, even when compared to legendary commanders. The final commander that I want to take a serious look at, and I'll give Ulji Mundak an honorable mention, in that, yeah, you're doing a defense reduction over here of 30%. That's fine. Aethelflaed is already giving us attack, defense, and health 30%. So I think Ulji Mundak's fine, but not stupendous. What I think is stupendous is Joan of Arc. This is stupendous. If you want to be the most optimal debuffing and buffing combination, you pair with Joan of Arc. The healing skill here does have some synergy, and this buff is generating rage, which is what Aethelflaed really wants to be doing what? Casting more of those debuffs. So I think this is a mighty fine pairing that you could rock on the battlefield and do some serious work. My friends, I hope you have found this guide to be helpful. Is there something else I should have been considering? Is there something else that I missed? I mean, we could talk about like barbarian battling pairings, but I don't know. How compelling is that? Pick a commander that does damage against our barbarian and like use them, right? Like use Minamoto or Cao Cao or Belisarius or Boudica or Lohar. They're all going to be great for battling barbarians. If you found this video helpful, like and subscribe. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.